The first thing I want to check in on is kind of how you get to the surgeon's office as well. And one thing that I have seen a lot is that we get to a particular surgeon's office by pure convenience. And this might be something as simple as they were the first doctor you saw, and therefore they're the one to take care of you. A friend of mine, when I was also playing rugby, tore his labrum, and he did something very interesting, which always sticks in my mind. He Googled labrum tears, realized that they were quite common in American football in the US. So he then found out the most reputable labrum surgeon in the US. Got a hold of him, sent his documents over to him, and got an appointment, sent his scans over to him, and actually got an appointment with him. And one of the questions that he asked him was, how many of these surgeries have you done? And the guy basically laughed at him and said, thousands. I do about 10 every day. Probably didn't do quite 10, but that gives you some kind of benchmark. So the journey into the surgeon's office is quite important, and what that surgeon has done and how specialized they are in that particular area. And this is actually where, if you do live in the Middle East, in Dubai, this is where for sports injuries, we don't see a whole heap. They are definitely increasing, and somewhere some of my medical friends will hopefully have some data to throw at me to back this up or to break down this argument. But a lot of orthopedic surgeons that I've seen here specialize in a number of different areas in the body, which to me is not specialization at all. So the journey to the surgeon's office is super important, that perhaps you're sat in front of someone that you trust implicitly with the area, with the limb that you have a problem with. I am a little bit skeptical of orthopedic surgeons that do a little bit of everything. So I would always ask them when they last did this surgery. And unless you have a rare condition, if it's quite a common condition, which a lot of the injuries that we see are super common, then when did they last do one of these surgeries? You'll also be able to judge by their reaction to that sort of questioning as to what sort of person they are. Because some surgeons get very protective and maybe a little bit insulted by the fact that you're asking them these questions. But when you buy a flashy motor car, you ask a load of questions because you're putting a lot of money into it. Your body is pretty much priceless, and you won't see it, especially if you live here, because you won't see the bill for the surgery, but you are paying a lot of money to have that surgery. So you deserve to ask a lot of questions.